The live audience at Late Night with Emily Rogers sat in rapt silence, the usual ripple of laughter absent as Emily Rogers leaned into his microphone, his trademark levity giving way to a steely intensity. Across from him sat Caroline Levitt, the 27-year-old press secretary to the president, composed in a crisp midnight blue suit. Her fingers were neatly laced atop the desk, her demeanor calm despite the electric tension crackling across the studio. "Miss Levitt," Sutton began, his voice laced with the practiced sharpness of a seasoned television host, "you've repeatedly defended the administration's immigration stance with numbers that don't appear to reflect reality. I have to ask, are you knowingly misleading the public or simply parroting what you've been instructed to say?" The accusation hovered like a drawn blade. The audience stirred uncomfortably and the studio cameras zoomed in on Levitt's unreadable expression. The broadcast, live on Continental Network from their flagship New York studio on May 10, 2025, had drawn millions of viewers, all waiting to witness how the young press secretary would navigate one of television's most scrutinizing interrogations. What followed stunned both studio spectators and the vast audience watching from home. Without averting her gaze, Levitt calmly reached into her folder and withdrew a document no one imagined she possessed. Within moments, Sutton's air of confident control gave way to a flicker of unease as Levitt poised to deliver a response that would throw the show off balance and momentarily silence one of the nation's most cherished late-night figures. But before we delve into this extraordinary exchange that has gripped the nation, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more exclusive political encounters that are reshaping discourse across the country. It was a fraught chapter in America's story, a year when the country felt more fragmented than ever before. In 2025, immigration and border enforcement had become incendiary flashpoints, dominating headlines and fueling ideological skirmishes. President Donald Trump, returned to power in a historic political resurgence, had once again centered his presidency on border security. He touted sweeping new strategies he claimed had slashed illegal migration by 57% and ushered in greater safety in communities near the frontier. Detractors, including much of the press and Democratic opposition, accused the administration of embellishing figures and using doctored metrics to validate contentious actions, including mass deportations and a renewed multi-billion-dollar barrier expansion along the southern perimeter. The statistics were hotly debated. While Trump's administration pointed to a dramatic downturn, critics brandished Department of Homeland Security documentation indicating a mere 12% decline in detainments. Late Night with Emily Rogers, filmed in the cultural heart of Manhattan, had long transcended entertainment. At 57, Sutton stood at the pinnacle of his career, his mantle crowded with accolades, his audience vast and loyal. A veteran of comedy and social commentary, he had become, for many progressives, a voice of conscience cloaked in satire. His nightly monologues regularly targeted Trump-era policies, earning him both fervent admiration and intense rebuke. Lately, Sutton had zeroed in on Caroline Levitt, launching pointed jabs from his desk. This 27-year-old press secretary claims border arrests are down 57%, he quipped in one widely circulated clip, brandishing a colorful chart to peals of laughter. But according to these numbers, either she's spinning fiction or she's reading from a script she doesn't fully grasp. It was classic Sutton, acerbic, theatrical, and engineered to resonate. And it laid the groundwork for a dramatic encounter when his team announced Levitt's upcoming appearance to face unsparing questions about the administration's migration narrative. Caroline Levitt was an unexpected protagonist in this unfolding drama. At just 27, she had shattered precedent as the youngest press secretary in American history. A native of rural Vermont, she had earned her degree in political science from Greenridge College before plunging into conservative politics. Her formative years included a stint as assistant press secretary during Trump's first term and a later role as communications director for Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, a rising force in the GOP. Though critics derided her meteoric rise as premature, admirers championed her as a composed and articulate new face for conservatism. Her press briefings were grueling sessions where she fielded relentless questions on everything from inflation metrics to the president's latest social media posts. Immigration remained the most volatile subject, and as the administration's chief spokesperson, Levitt often found herself accused of spinning or obscuring the facts. Her segment on Late Night with Emily Rogers had been marketed as a rare opportunity for an outsider to hold a top administration official to account outside the confines of Washington. Sutton's producers hailed it as a civic duty, promising a no-holds-barred examination of the White House's border claims. Behind the scenes, the show's team spent days sifting through data, consulting immigration experts, and compiling testimonials from DHS insiders who alleged internal pressure to present distorted numbers. The episode had been constructed for confrontation, Sutton as the relentless inquisitor, Levit the youthful figure poised to be overwhelmed. As one analyst on ENN remarked prior to the show, Sutton's crew has assembled a case meant to corner her. Levit is stepping directly into an ambush, and she has to know it. What remained hidden was that Levit had been quietly preparing, aware of the terrain awaiting her. For weeks, her team had pored over public documents, leaked memos, and internal communications, suspecting that Sutton's case would hinge on carefully orchestrated narratives. Levit's approach was unmistakable: defend the administration's agenda with indisputable data and be ready to counter every accusation with her own arsenal of facts. As she stepped onto the polished stage of the Emily Rogers Hour, portfolio in hand, she was no longer merely a spokesperson, she was a strategist entering the arena. The set was aglow with studio lights, sleek and modern, with a sharp-lined desk between Sutton and Levit. The audience, a lively blend of out-of-towners, political junkies, and hand-picked guests, buzzed with anticipation. Sutton launched into his trademark opening monologue, tossing out jabs at celebrity mishaps before pivoting to politics. "Tonight, we're joined by the White House Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt," he said, pausing just long enough for dramatic effect. "She's here to explain why the administration's border stats seem, let's say, a little creative. Spoiler, I brought my own receipts." Laughter rolled through the crowd. The battle lines were drawn. Following a commercial interlude, Leavitt was introduced. She strode into polite applause, her tailored navy ensemble sharp, her expression unreadable. Sutton dove straight in. "Miss Leavitt, let's cut to the chase. You've stated that border apprehensions are down 57% under President Trump's renewed policies. But I've got a report here from the Department of Homeland Security that says it's actually 12%. That's a pretty big discrepancy. Are you misleading the public or just repeating what you're told?" A ripple of unease moved through the audience. The air grew taut. Leavitt didn't so much as blink. "Mr. Sutton, thank you for having me. The 57% decrease refers specifically to Zone R4, where we launched our initial tactical rollout. It's a pilot region with measurable results. The 12% you're citing is the national baseline, recorded before the full plan was implemented." Sutton tilted his head, skeptical. "That's not what you said during your press briefing. You told the country that border crossings were down 57%, no qualifiers, no regional disclaimers." The audience murmured, appreciating his precision. "With all due respect, Mr. Sutton," Leavitt responded, her voice unwavering, "if you refer to the full transcript of that briefing, you'll see I stated, our preliminary data from strategic zones shows a 57% drop." The context was explicit. She paused just long enough for the point to settle. A few audience members exchanged surprised glances at her composure. Sutton wasn't ready to yield. "All right, suppose you're right about that. I've got another issue. The Hudson Policy Consortium claims even the 12% number is overstated. Their analysts report no meaningful shift. Are you familiar with their conclusions?" Leavitt gave a brief nod. "I am, and their report was based on initial figures from January 2025. Our data includes developments through February and March. Those additions reveal a consistent downward trend. I'd be happy to share the methodology with your researchers." What followed was a rapid-fire exchange, Sutton rattling off studies from think tanks, university institutes, and investigative journalists, each disputing the administration's narrative. Leavitt responded with precision, citing internal audits, raw patrol data, and crime statistics from border locales such as Sierra Blanca and Laredo. Her tone never rose, but each answer struck with the confidence of someone deeply versed in the material. She noted a 23% decrease in violent incidents in Marfa, Texas, attributing it to newly deployed surveillance platforms, and explained how secondary checkpoint interceptions had improved by 15% due to targeted retraining. As the debate wore on, a subtle shift occurred. The crowd, initially geared to cheer Sutton, began nodding along with Leavitt. Some even applauded. Social media exploded. On platforms like Voxline and Sphere, posts read, "Leavitt is owning this interview, and did Sutton just get fact-checked live on his own show?" In the control booth, the production crew grew restless. One producer messaged another, "She's not folding. We've got to change direction." After another break, Sutton returned with a new line of attack. "All right, let's pivot. Let's talk narcotics, Miss Leavitt. You've celebrated a 40% drop in drug seizures at the border. But couldn't that just mean more drugs are slipping through undetected? Fewer busts might not be a win, it could be a red flag." How do you spin that? Levit leaned forward slightly, gaze fixed. Mr. Sutton, drug interdiction isn't measured by seizure totals alone. That's a flawed metric. We assess broader indicators: confidential source intel, fluctuation in street prices, and interdiction success at layered checkpoints. For instance, heroin prices in Tucson have surged 18% over the past half year. That signals tighter supply. Fewer seizures occur because there's simply less product in transit. Sutton blinked, momentarily caught off guard. That's a convenient rationale. But I've heard from DEA insiders, career agents, not political appointees, who claim the opposite. They say flow is up, not down. How do you reconcile that? The DEA report you're referencing, Levit replied evenly, analyzes urban distribution networks. Our figures track border intake and logistical disruptions, particularly those stemming from new bilateral trade protocols with Mexico. We model those patterns comprehensively. I'd be happy to provide your team with the full framework. The studio was hushed. The usual rhythm of late-night banter had given way to something more akin to a congressional hearing. Sutton, master of recovery through humor, attempted to lighten the moment. Miss Levit, I have to ask, did you memorize a binder before you came here? Laughter broke the tension. But Levit's reply remained composed. I prepared thoroughly, Mr. Sutton. My duty is to present the administration's policy with clarity and evidence. That's what the American public deserves. Applause rippled through the audience, this time more enthusiastic, more deliberate. Sutton's smile thinned. He could feel the momentum shifting, and the crowd was no longer with him. In the control room, the production team exchanged tense glances. A quick hand signal called for another commercial break, a brief window to regroup. During the pause, Levit calmly sipped from her water bottle, reviewing her notes with quiet precision. Sutton, meanwhile, stepped behind the stage partition, huddling with his team. A fresh stack of cue cards was handed to him, the top sheet labeled Classified, DHS Sources. He scanned it quickly. She's burying us with details, a producer murmured. We need something that hits hard, something final. Sutton gave a curt nod, flipping through the folder containing what he considered his most damning ammunition, testimonies from senior officials that, he believed, would turn the tide. When the cameras returned, Sutton's voice dropped an octave, heavy with gravity. Miss Levit, you've been impressively polished this evening. But let's not sidestep the heart of the matter. Your public claims about border policy are contradicted by sworn statements from multiple career officials across federal agencies. This isn't a matter of interpretation, it's about integrity. I have here signed declarations from 5 high-ranking Homeland officials who state, under oath, that they were pressured to alter data to fit the administration's message. These are veteran civil servants, some with decades of service, who risked everything to speak up. How do you respond to them? A collective hush fell across the room. The studio lights caught Levit's expression, still composed, still unreadable. She took another sip of water, unhurried. Sutton leaned back, believing he'd landed the decisive blow. The control booth buzzed with anticipation. Editors were already slicing the segment for upload, confident this would dominate headlines by morning. Levit's next move was slow, deliberate. She opened her portfolio and withdrew a document, holding it up so the studio cameras could zoom in. Mr. Sutton, I anticipated you might bring this up, she began coolly. What I have here are a series of email exchanges between your production staff and those very same 5 DHS officials, dated a full 2 weeks before their statements were officially submitted. Sutton's smile twitched. The audience sat motionless, the shift in energy palpable. These correspondences, Levit continued, her voice even but edged with authority, obtained via a federal transparency request, include language verbatim crafted by your staff. In several instances, the emails explicitly suggest how the data should be framed to serve a particular media narrative. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Sutton subtly adjusted his posture, his fingers tapping restlessly on the desk. That's an extraordinary claim, Miss Levit. You're suggesting that my team scripted whistleblowers? I'm saying the documents speak clearly for themselves, she replied, signaling to a stage assistant who handed a bound folder to Sutton's staff. In the copy I've provided, you'll find highlighted excerpts. For example, in an email from your senior producer, Margaret Bell, she writes, and I quote, "The language on data distortion needs more punch if this is going to land on camera." There's also a direct message from you, Mr. Sutton, to director Andrew Morgan, encouraging him to frame the policy conflict as a case of deliberate manipulation. That's what makes headlines. The studio fell into stunned silence, interrupted only by the faint clicking of smartphone keyboards as audience members turned to social media. On Sphere and Vox Line, hashtags surged, hashtag Sutton revealed and hashtag Levit unleashed. Sutton tried to interject. These were standard communications. These officials approached us with serious concerns. Our role as journalists is to help bring those concerns to light. Levit's expression didn't waver. With respect, the email chains include clear indications that your team initiated contact. In fact, page 4 of the packet shows outreach from your associate producer to 3 of the 5 officials long before any concerns were publicly stated. The language used wasn't just facilitative, it was directive. She faced the audience now, her tone calm but firm. I've also included meeting notes from private sessions held between these officials and editorial staff at the Tribune, North Point News, and Vista Channel, all coordinated by your producers in advance of their official filings. Sutton's demeanor hardened, his usual charisma replaced by tight restraint. This is deflection, Miss Levit. It's a carefully planned political spectacle meant to derail valid scrutiny of your administration's record. It might play well on television, but it doesn't answer the core issue, why your numbers conflict with the facts. Levit didn't flinch. Page 7 of that document provides complete context. These weren't whistleblowers driven by conscience, they were politically affiliated figures hand-picked for a narrative. On page 12, you'll find correspondence between 2 of the individuals, Kimberly Cook and James Carter, and a third party representing Monarch Studios, a subsidiary of your network's parent company. The emails discuss future consulting opportunities, media contracts, and financial compensation offered contingent on their cooperation in framing their testimony. The words dropped like a thunderclap. Audience members gasped audibly, and from the production booth came hurried voices over comms, orders being given, segments reviewed. Online, a firestorm erupted. Did Sutton's team bribe sources for drama? Levit didn't just show up, she came armed. In press rooms across the city, journalists filed breaking alerts. The once adoring crowd was visibly fractured, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others rising to applaud Levit's composure. Sutton, understanding the severity of what had just unfolded, tried to recover. Miss Levit, let's be clear. You've arrived here with a meticulously crafted attack meant to discredit legitimate sources and distract from your administration's accountability. This is theater, nothing more. But Levit wasn't baited. Her voice remained composed, resolute. Mr. Kimmel, I've addressed each substantive policy inquiry with precise figures, from detention rates to criminal trends and narcotics interception data. I'm merely clarifying the origins of the testimonies you've presented. The public has a right to know when seemingly impartial testimony has been scripted for dramatic effect. The crowd, now polarized, burst into a mixture of claps and murmurs. Some chanted, "Jimmy, Jimmy," while others applauded Levit's resolve, shouting, "Stand tall, Caroline." Sensing the tension escalating, Kimmel motioned for a commercial interlude. As the broadcast cut away, stage crew hurried to transfer Levit's files to Kimmel's staff. Behind the curtains, producers clustered, whispering hurriedly about how to manage the unfolding crisis. "She's got everything," emails, text messages, full correspondence, a producer muttered, rifling through the folder. No one saw this coming. During the break, Levit calmly reviewed her notes, her composure unwavering. Kimmel, visibly shaken, conferred with his backstage team, who pressed him to pivot back to policy discourse. "Stay away from the emails," one producer urged. "Steer her back to the security statistics." Kimmel nodded reluctantly, but the ease and flair he was known for had noticeably faded. Meanwhile, the audience buzzed with anticipation. Phones lit up across the studio as attendees fired off real-time updates on X, one post going viral at Kimmel's show, and Levit just flipped the narrative. Unreal. As the broadcast resumed, Levit turned to Kimmel with a respectful but unwavering tone. "Mr. Kimmel, I came here to engage in a good-faith discussion about policy distinctions. I welcome a sincere exchange on strategies for safeguarding our borders. Our records indicate a 57% decline in Zone C3, a nationwide average of 12%, and a 40% drop in narcotic trafficking across several key metrics. But I'm also here to stand firm in defense of both the administration's credibility and my own. The people deserve more than choreographed theatrics passed off as journalism." The crowd, now visibly split, responded with a mixture of enthusiastic applause and subdued murmuring. For a moment, Kimmel seemed at a loss for a witty retort, his tone noticeably softened. "All right," he said. "While my team reviews these documents, let's get back to the figures. You say you've got comprehensive data on border enforcement. Would you share it with us?" Levit nodded and retrieved a carefully prepared presentation from her briefcase. "Gladly, Mr. Kimmel. I've assembled a robust dataset that addresses every major concern raised tonight, complete with sourcing and methodological clarity." She guided the audience through a series of visual aids displayed behind her, detailing detention numbers by region, crime patterns in frontier communities, and narcotics interception statistics. She explained how Zone C3's 57% reduction was accomplished through specialized patrol units and AI-assisted monitoring, how Crescent City's violent crime rate dropped 23% through localized policing initiatives, and how sharp upticks in heroin prices pointed to dwindling supply lines. Her articulation was lucid, assured, and highly engaging, transforming the segment into a lesson in policy defense. The audience hung on her words, some even jotting notes on their phones. Posts flooded X, "This is what a press secretary looks like, and Levit's running this show like a pro." Kimmel, impressed in spite of himself, attempted to reclaim the tempo with a lighter query. "So, Miss Levit, ever get weary of championing these policies? You're only 27, don't you crave a little fun now and then?" Levit offered a gracious smile, parrying the question effortlessly. "I love what I do, Mr. Kimmel. Serving the public is the most meaningful pursuit I could imagine." The audience broke into applause, and for the first time, Kimmel seemed to acknowledge her as a genuine force. "Fair enough," he said with a laugh. "You're good at this, I'll give you that." As the show drew to a close, the power dynamic had shifted entirely. What began as an attempt to undermine a young press secretary had evolved into a showcase of her command of complex issues and strategic finesse. The crowd rose in ovation as Kimmel closed the segment, his trademark satire tinged with newfound regard. "Caroline Levitt, everyone," he announced, clapping. "You've certainly given us a lot to digest tonight." Backstage, journalists swarmed around Levitt, hungry for statements, while Kimmel huddled with his producers, poring over the documents that had appended the segment's direction. What was meant to expose a government spokesperson had instead become a possible ethics scandal for one of late-night television's most prominent figures, all because Levitt came equipped with receipts no one expected. As the studio lights faded, the true storm was only just gathering strength, poised to erupt across digital platforms and alter the political terrain. The fallout was explosive. Clips of Levitt's evidence reveal spread like wildfire, drawing tens of millions of views within hours. #Levitt vs. Kimmel surged to the top of global trends across X, TikTok, and YouTube, with memes, commentary, and dueling opinions dominating the digital discourse. Right-leaning outlets like Patriot News Network headlined, "Levitt unmasks Kimmel's orchestrated testimony," lauding her composure and depth. "She entered the lion's den and emerged triumphant," declared one anchor. Progressive media responded with skepticism. Metroview ran the headline, "Levitt's shift raises doubts about border figures," though even their analysts acknowledged the force of her delivery. "She was prepared for a confrontation," one commentator admitted. "And she came armed for it." Meanwhile, Global Today's chief political correspondent, clearly taken aback, delivered a primetime segment. "What we witnessed on May 10, 2025, was astonishing." Jimmy Kimmel, long hailed as a sharp political satirist, was caught off guard as a 27-year-old press secretary turned his show into a platform for data-backed rebuttal. This wasn't just entertainment, it was a seismic moment in political media. The Boston Ledger ran an in-depth analysis titled "The Levitt Pivot: How One Press Secretary Redefined Late-Night Discourse," commending her tactical precision and unflappable resolve. Her readiness, not merely in defensive statistics but with proactive, evidentiary material, marks a transformative shift in how government officials navigate adversarial media, the piece observed. The London Herald ran with the headline, "Press Secretary Stuns in Televised Confrontation," while the Avalon Gazette zeroed in on the journalistic implications. Levitt-Kimmel clash sparks ethics debate on media scripting. Independent fact-checkers, including VerifyNet and FactLens, authenticated Levitt's dossier. Although interpretations varied, some contended Kimmel's producers had simply engaged in conventional editorial collaboration, helping sources structure their narratives. Others saw the alleged promises of media exposure as a blatant ethical violation. One viral post on X read, "If Kimmel's crew dangled career perks for soundbites, that's not journalism. That's manipulation." Within hours, Kimmel's team released an official response. Dialogue with concerned officials is a cornerstone of journalistic process and has been deliberately distorted for political theater. We stand by our reporting and remain committed to holding power accountable. Kimmel himself addressed the uproar on his following broadcast, melding sarcasm with defiance. "So apparently I'm the villain now," he joked, holding up the now infamous folder to a ripple of laughter. "But let's be clear, we talk to people, verify facts, and report the truth. If that's scandalous, I'm guilty." While acknowledging a need for greater transparency, he stopped short of any apology, drawing applause from his studio crowd. Behind the scenes, however, his producers initiated a quiet internal audit examining communications with informants. At the same time, the White House capitalized on the moment. Press releases lauded Levit's data-backed defense and her exposure of performance masquerading as journalism. President Trump posted on X, "Proud of Caroline Levitt for standing strong against Kimmel's ambush with facts. This is leadership. This is why I chose her." The post racked up millions of interactions, cementing Levitt's triumph. Conservative influencers celebrated with a viral image of Levitt holding a dossier labeled Kimmel's kryptonite. Progressive voices, however, sounded alarms about journalistic repercussions. An analyst on Public Scope warned, "If every source's communication can be weaponized, it risks silencing legitimate whistleblowers." Levitt's public image skyrocketed overnight. Once viewed primarily as a devoted young aide, she was now regarded as a formidable political operator. Long-form features in Harper's, The Federal Review, and Westbridge traced her upbringing in rural Vermont, her collegiate years at St. Gregory's, and her meteoric ascent within conservative circles. The new vanguard of political combat, declared Harper's, emphasizing her resonance with a new generation of right-leaning women. College conservative groups flooded her inbox with keynote requests, and her ex-follower count doubled overnight. Fans began circulating a new hashtag Captain Caroline 2028. A university student posted, "Caroline Levitt just proved that you don't need decades of experience to dominate a debate. She's my role model." Within the administration, Levitt's stature shifted palpably. "She's always had the president's confidence," a senior staffer told the Hilltop Tribune. "But now she has the admiration of the entire political class. She took on a cultural giant, and one not with spin, but with substance." Her press briefings took on a sharper tone, and even adversarial journalists approached her with renewed caution. One correspondent remarked, "She's evolved beyond a spokesperson. She's a tactician who can flip a narrative in real time." The confrontation reshaped norms across the media landscape. TV producers and investigative reporters began re-examining their sourcing practices, wary of being blindsided by similar document dumps. One media consultant told Polyline, "Levitt rewrote the playbook. Everyone's suddenly aware that their inbox could become Exhibit A on national television." Kimmel's team quietly updated their internal guidelines, emphasizing transparency and auditability. Other late-night hosts, including Donna Cooper and Joshua Torres, approached their political segments with more caution, aware that Levitt's counterattack model could be mirrored against them. A satirical writer mused online, "Memo to self, never come for Caroline Levitt without a paper trail that can survive a spotlight." The fallout also triggered deeper conversations around the boundaries of media ethics. Journalism professors added the Levitt-Kimmel exchange to their syllabi, studying it as a prime case in source management and disclosure. A scholar from Monarch University explained on NPR, "Levitt peeled back a layer of how the media sometimes curates whistleblower narratives. There's idealism, yes, but often strategy, too." Right-leaning policy forums hosted symposiums on ideological bias in the information age, touting Levitt's documents as proof of systemic slant. Meanwhile, progressive outlets doubled down on scrutinizing the administration's policy metrics, determined to pivot the conversation back to substantive governance. 6 months on, Capital Current named Levitt among its 40 under 40 changemakers. The profile opened. Before her confrontation on the Nightline stage, Caroline Levitt was a symbol of loyalty and youthful promise. After dismantling one of television's fiercest satirists armed with nothing but a folder and conviction, she emerged as something else entirely, a new archetype of political mastery, combining fluency in policy with battlefield-level strategy. The feature chronicled her preparation, noting how she had spent weeks with a team of policy analysts and legal advisors, forecasting every possible angle of Kimmel's approach. It also emphasized her cross-generational appeal, quoting one conservative campaigner, "She's the blueprint for the next era of leadership, intelligent, unshakable, and utterly fearless." Campaign consultants dissected her performance in workshops, praising her for shifting from defense to offense with surgical accuracy. One strategist summarized, "She didn't just hold the line, she stormed the field. That's the kind of tactical brilliance that wins in the digital age." Media coaches across the political spectrum began urging clients to prepare like Levitt, stressing the power of well-documented proof in televised confrontations. The Levit-Kimmel duel had become more than a flashpoint, it was now a blueprint. For the broader public, the confrontation served as a rare, unfiltered glimpse, pulling back the velvet curtain on the intricate dance between political messaging and media influence. It revealed that perceived power, whether embodied in Kimmel's stature as a cultural icon or in Levit's role as a youthful government emissary, could be swiftly overturned by meticulous preparation and incontrovertible proof. The encounter transcended mere discourse on immigration metrics or journalistic ethics. It captured something deeper, the shifting anatomy of authority in an era marked by ideological divides, where truth, readiness, and tactical clarity could realign narratives in a heartbeat. Levit's impact from that evening endured well beyond the headlines. In her subsequent appearances, she exuded a composed resolve, her signature folder always within reach. Journalists, once emboldened, now approached her with increased care, mindful that any loosely framed question might be met with an impeccably sourced rebuttal. Kimmel, for his part, regained his rhythm with characteristic wit, but the moment left its imprint. In later monologues, he quipped, "Lesson learned. Never go toe-to-toe with a 27-year-old carrying a folder like it's a sword." Yet behind the laughter, his production team quietly recalibrated. Sources were re-verified, accusations were tempered, and every editorial choice was made with the memory of that night's reversal lingering close. The ripple effects reached the public square. National surveys indicated a subtle rise in doubt toward the objectivity of political satire on evening talk shows. Viewers began to ask whether figures like Kimmel were offering critique or choreography. Conversely, Levit's poised performance ignited enthusiasm among conservative audiences, who cast her as a modern-day David facing down a Goliath of cultural liberalism. One viral X-post captured the sentiment. Caroline Levitt didn't just win an argument. She modeled how to reclaim ground with preparation, not performance. As 2025 gave way to 2026, the Levit-Kimmel showdown retained its resonance, a case study in the primacy of foresight in the digital coliseum of public opinion. For Levitt, the moment proved transformative, elevating her from a disciplined party soldier to a commanding political force. For Kimmel, it became a poignant reminder of the perils of underestimating a quiet opponent. And for the citizenry, it offered a fleeting but potent look behind the glossy veneers of broadcast and bureaucracy, illuminating a timeless truth, newly felt. In the contest for credibility, the one who brings the receipts wins.